Good Vach, Bershus, with permission of friends old and new. It's very late, so I'm going to try to be as brief as possible. You see, brief is the hallmark of all good divrei Torah. Like it says, Al Yiftar Odem Mechavero, my father says, in Avos the Rabbi Nasan, Elemi Toich Dvar Halacha. A person should not depart the midst of friendship, but with one word of Torah. My father says, notice the terminology. It says, Elamitoch Devar Halacha. One word of Torah, not two. One word of Torah people remember, not two. Coming back to the Mishnahs that we're learning in Pirkei Avot, we come to the next Mishnah following on the heels of Hillel and Shammai. Comes the next Mishnah and it says the following. Rabban Gamliel Rabbi Gamliel says, make for yourself a rabbi, and distance yourself from doubt. And don't, when giving tithes, do any guessing. Look at the Mishnah again, my friends. The first word should strike you as at odds with any of the prior Mishnahs. Rabban Gamliel says, is that how any of the other Mishnahs begin? No. Generally, it tells us something else. If you look at these three beginning words of this Mishnah, there are many, many instances that should come to your conscience as being outside of the box from all of the other Mishnahs. Rabban Gamliel Omer. Wait. First of all, it says Rabbi Gamliel Omer. Rabbi Gamliel says. It doesn't tell us that Rabbi Gamliel got the Masorah, that he received the oral tradition from Hillel and Shammai. In every other Mishnah in which we mention the names of everybody, it says, Kiblu Mayam. They got it from them. Here, Kibel, Kabbalah, acquisition and acquiring this oral tradition is completely omitted. Why? That's one. Number two, look at the names of all of the Tanoim that have come before Rabban Gamliel. Did any of them have a title to their names? Not one. Shimon HaTzadik? Maybe he had a title. Shimon the Righteous. But he didn't have an honorific as a prefix to his name. Comes Antignus Ish Soicho, Yossi ben Yoezer, Yossi ben Yochanan, Nitai HaRabbeili, all of them. Did any of them have the word rabbi attached to their name? The answer is nary a one. Not until we get here. So what's going on? So let's discuss. Because in order to understand, you have to understand the time a little bit. See, Rabban Gamliel, no, he did not acquire the Torah and the Masorah from Hillel and Shammai directly. Rabban Gamliel was a grandson of Hillel, and he received the Torah and the Masorah from his father, whose name was Shimon. And since Shimon only reigned as the Nasi in Klal Yisrael for a short period of time, and there are no recordings of his statements throughout the corpus of Shas, his name is not mentioned here. That's one explanation. Another is because he's the grandson of Hillel, who acquired it from his father Shimon, who was the son of Hillel. And therefore, when there's a direct transmission from father to son, there's no need for the Mishnah to tell us that there was a separate Kabbalah and acquisition from somebody outside of the family circle, so to speak. Rabban Gamliel says, why do I have a title, Rabban Gamliel, over here? So there are a few things that are interesting historically concerning this era of time. You see, at that moment in time, they nullified the Av Bezdin position, and the Nasi was everything. There was no longer the pairs as we had them before. Thus comes the end of the era of the zugos and the pairs. Now comes along the era of the rabbis. And now with the advent of the era of the rabbis, let's look to what the next statement that Rabban Gamliel makes. He says, Asay l'charav, make for yourself a rabbi. How is this statement different than the previous statement that Yeshua ben Prakya made when he said Asay l'charav? Rabban Gamliel really is not coming along to teach us really anything different than what Yeshua ben Prakya said at the beginning of us when he said, get yourself a rabbi, make yourself a rabbi, to over here. I'd like to suggest that Rabban Gamliel is saying, Asay l'charav, in the advent of the era of Rabbonim, and that the reason why we made the title of rabbi to all of them and gave them this honorific, whereas before there were no honorifics associated with their names, is because now crept in to Klal Yisrael was machlokes, was debate and dispute al pi halacha. There was no clear-cut path as to how one should rule in any given way. There was doubt. That's why the next phrase is Istalek min hasofek. Distance yourself from doubtful things. Distance yourself from doubtful things. The only way to do that is if you acquire one rabbi. And one rabbi shows you the path in life. Because now, when there's machlokas, where there wasn't any beforehand in Klal Yisrael, now when there is dispute and argumentation, there is dichotomy and schism within Torah. Now you have to find your path and to distance yourself from doubt by the acquisition of one rabbi who will show you the way out. This is what is meant by Rabbi Gamliel's dictum, Asay l'charav v'yistalek min hastafek, and distance yourself from doubt. In the end, Rabban Gamliel says, Ve'alta b'la asher mudos, and don't, when it comes to tithing, do what? Do guesswork. When it comes to give Meiser, you're only allowed to execute it with exactitude. It must be given exactly the manner in which it is prescribed by the Torah. You cannot use guesswork in order to do that. Therefore, if you don't have a Rav, and there's a lot of machlokas in Klal Yisrael, and you don't know what the halacha is, guess what you're going to do? You'll do a little guesswork. I'll give the tithe in that manner. No, it doesn't work that way. He says, and don't do guesswork when it comes to giving the tithes. This, in my position, in my estimation, is a homily. What does it mean, don't do guesswork? Here comes Rabban Gamliel in a new generation. The new generation is the generation of the rabbis. This is the new era that is evolving. We've evolved from the pairs and the zugos into a new timeline, new needs and new necessities. Just recently made a siyum on Masechta Huriyos, and at the end of Masechta Huriyos, there's a machlokas, and the machlokas goes as follows. They wanted to know who was going to be the next leader of Klal Yisrael. So they sent the question off, and they said, who's better? Oker Harim or Sinai? Oker Harim literally means that individual that moves mountains. Sinai, or Sinai, means a person who has encyclopedic knowledge. My father liked to explain the Oker Harim. He's a sagacious individual. He has perspicacity. He could move mountains with his logic. He understands Mavin Dover Mitoich Dover. He understands things within one another. He should be the head of Klal Yisrael? Is the Nasi and the Av Bezdin? Or who should be? The person who's called the Sinai, the one with encyclopedic knowledge. That if you took a pin and you placed it through the book cover, he could tell you what letter it would come out in Shas. He could count the bricks on the side of a wall and tell you what its meaning is. the Sinai with the encyclopedic and exacting knowledge versus the person who can move mountains with his logic. They sent back the following answer. Sinai Odif. The man with the encyclopedic knowledge. He's better. Sort of Chaim Shmulevitz in Tzichas Musa. He says, why is the Sinai better than the Okahar? And he says the Sinai is better because if you want to transmit the oral law to the next generation, it can't have compromise and it can't have logic. It must be with exactitude and exactness. So I'd like to suggest that when Rabban Gamliel is talking about the new generation of the era of the rabbis, in which he is the first one to be called rabbi, and he says, "Aseh lecha rab, make for yourself a rabbi, v'yistalek min hasafek, and distance yourself from doubt, ve'altar b'la asar amudos." And don't guess when it comes to tithing. If you're going to be the leader of a new generation, there is no guesswork. There is no moving mountains with your logic. It must come from exactitude. It must come from a precision instrument that knows the Torah and the Masorah, Yedin Vort Aleph Beis Gimel Dalet until Taf. Every letter and every word must be an exact duplicate, a simulacrum of the generation that it came from beforehand. Rabbi say, you want to be a manhig, you want to be a leader, you want to be a rabbi, know what your Rebbe said. Good night. Good vach.